The room is quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion. You sit there, staring at nothing, feeling everything. You've achieved things. You've grown up. You've learned how to function, how to meet expectations, how to keep going even when you feel nothing inside. But still, in the moments between your distractions, something inside you stirs. A small, trembling voice you can almost hear if you stop long enough. That voice doesn't sound like the adult you've become. It sounds younger. It sounds like the version of you that still remembers the first time you felt unworthy. The one who cried alone because nobody noticed. The one who was told to be quiet, to toughen up, to stop being too sensitive. Most people think they've left that child behind. They believe growing up means outgrowing the past, that if you build enough discipline, enough success, enough distance, the pain will finally stay buried. But here's the truth most of us don't want to face. You don't outgrow your childhood wounds. You just get better at hiding them. You call it drive. You call it ambition. You call it perfectionism. But beneath all those adult words is something simpler: punishment. A subtle, constant punishment toward yourself for being once so powerless, so needy, so human. The adult becomes the warden of the child they once were. And every time you push yourself harder, every time you silence your emotions, every time you tell yourself you should be better by now, you're not disciplining the adult. You're still trying to correct the child who thought they were the problem. You think it's self-improvement. But often, it's self-rejection wearing a motivational disguise. There's a reason why certain compliments make you uncomfortable, why rest feels undeserved, why you struggle to accept love without preparing for it to disappear. There's a reason you can't stop replaying old mistakes in your head. You're not addicted to guilt. You're trying to keep the child safe by controlling the adult. Because deep down, you believe that if you can finally become good enough, strong enough, quiet enough, the pain from your past will finally stop echoing. But it doesn't. It only changes shape. The disappointment you once felt from your parents becomes the disappointment you now feel in yourself. The rejection from friends becomes the fear of intimacy in your relationships. The voice that once told you, "You're too much," becomes your own voice, whispering it back every time you try to rest. The child you once were doesn't disappear. They hide in the corners of your adult life, in your overthinking, in your exhaustion, in the way you apologize for existing. They show up in your relationships, in your self-talk, in the parts of you that feel broken for reasons you can't explain. Growing up, you were taught how to adapt, not how to heal. You learned to survive, not to feel. And so you built a version of yourself the world could love, someone stable, productive, rational, safe. But that version came at a cost. It required locking away the softness, the imagination, the wild innocence that once made you alive. You buried the child so you could be accepted as an adult. Now, the success you chase doesn't fill you. The approval you seek doesn't soothe you. Because no matter how much you achieve, the child within is still waiting, still hoping you'll finally turn around and say, "You did nothing wrong." It's strange, isn't it? How we spend years trying to become someone better, someone worthy, without realizing we're doing it to earn the love we never received when we needed it most. We punish ourselves for being human because we once believed humanity was weakness. You can run from the past, but you can't run from the one who lived it. That child, the one who felt invisible, misunderstood, too emotional, too scared, is still in you. And until you forgive them, you'll keep punishing the adult you've become. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means finally acknowledging that you were never meant to carry that pain alone. It means realizing that maturity isn't the absence of vulnerability, it's the courage to face it. We live in a world obsessed with improvement, with progress, with becoming more. But maybe the real transformation begins when you stop running from who you used to be. When you stop calling it weakness and start calling it the truth. Because the child you were is not your enemy. They are the beginning of everything real about you. The sensitivity you despised is the same compassion that makes you kind. The imagination you suppressed is the same creativity that helps you rebuild yourself. The tears you hid are the same emotions that remind you you're still alive. What you thought made you broken was just your heart asking to be seen again. So sit there in the quiet. Listen. Behind all the noise, all the armor, all the perfection, that small voice is still calling your name. It's not asking you to fix anything. It's asking you to remember. Because you can't become whole by abandoning the parts of you that needed love the most. When we were children, everything we felt was raw. Every word, every silence, every look, it all meant something. The child doesn't have logic, they only have emotion. When they are ignored, they don't think, my parents are busy. They think, I must not matter. When they are criticized, they don't think, someone is projecting their pain onto me. They think, something must be wrong with me. And those conclusions, innocent, irrational, emotional, become the quiet laws that govern our adult lives. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most of what you call personality is really protection. Most of your habits, your fears, your patterns, they were born the moment your inner child realized that love could be lost. The child learns early that being fully themselves comes at a cost. So they begin to trade authenticity for safety. They learn to smile when they're sad, to stay quiet when they're angry, to achieve when they feel empty. And over time, that survival strategy becomes identity. You grow up believing that your worth depends on how well you perform, how little you feel, how easily you please others. But what you don't realize is that your adult self is still obeying rules written by a frightened child. You might think you're being disciplined when you push yourself past exhaustion, but really, you're trying to silence the memory of feeling small. You might think you're being humble when you reject compliments, but really, you're afraid that love is conditional. You might think you're being strong when you don't cry, but really, you're terrified that if you start, you'll never stop. We don't outgrow our pain, we outgrow our awareness of it. We bury it under careers, relationships, and self-improvement projects. We call it productivity, ambition, independence, but if you look closely, you'll see the same child behind every adult mask. The one who wanted to be seen, to be held, to be told, you're enough. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, repress, or deny. The inner child is the first shadow we ever create. We banish them when we're told to grow up. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides beneath our reactions, our insecurities, our anger. It becomes the echo behind every overreaction and every numb silence. Every time you shame yourself for being emotional, you're repeating the voice of someone who once told you emotions were wrong. Every time you overwork, you're trying to earn the love you thought you had to deserve. Every time you sabotage something good, you're proving to yourself that you were right all along, that love never stays, that joy is not safe. Nietzsche wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But we spend our lives trying to eliminate the chaos, to tidy up the messy parts, to silence the wild child inside. Yet it's that very chaos, those tender, unfiltered emotions, that make us alive. The tragedy is that in trying to become perfect adults, we strangle the exact energy that makes life meaningful. Viktor Frankl said that meaning is not found in comfort, but in suffering transformed. The inner child is not something to destroy, it's something to transform. The pain you felt wasn't your fault, but the healing is your responsibility now. Because until you face that part of yourself, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, mistaking them for destiny. Think of your relationships. Do you notice how the same kind of person keeps appearing in your life? The one who doesn't listen or doesn't care or leaves. It's not random. The unconscious keeps recreating the past in the hope of changing its ending. The child inside you keeps trying to find someone who will finally give them the love they were denied. But here's the cruel paradox. Until you give that love to yourself, you'll keep finding people who mirror the pain, not the healing. That's why the same lessons return. Different faces, same ache. Life keeps handing you mirrors, hoping you'll finally see yourself in them. In our culture, we talk about healing your inner child, like it's a weekend exercise, something you can tick off a list. But real healing is not an event. It's a slow unlearning of the lie that you must be different to be loved. It's the daily choice to replace judgment with understanding, control with curiosity, shame with compassion. The adult self you've built is not the enemy. It was necessary. It was the armor that kept you alive. But now, that armor has become a cage. You wear it out of habit long after the war is over. And it's exhausting, isn't it? Always trying to be the version of yourself that nobody will reject. Always hiding behind humor, logic, or work so that no one sees how much you still hurt. The child you buried still lives in your body. You can hear them in your anxiety, in the knot in your chest before a difficult conversation, in the wave of guilt when you try to rest. They speak through tension, through fatigue, through the feeling that something's missing even when everything looks fine. Healing begins when you stop trying to silence those messages and start listening to them. When you realize the voice that says, "You're not enough," isn't your truth, it's your trauma. When you begin to see that the very qualities you reject, your sensitivity, your imagination, your longing, are not flaws but remnants of your most honest self. Philosophically, this is the battle between ego and essence. The ego was built to protect. It thrives on control, predictability, separation. The essence, the child, seeks connection, wonder, and truth. The conflict between them is the root of nearly all human suffering. We mistake control for safety, but in truth, it's control that keeps us afraid. We chase perfection, thinking it will bring peace, when what we really crave is acceptance. Alan Watts once said, "No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now." The reason we can't live now is because part of us is still frozen in the past. The body grows older, but the emotions remain the same age they were when they first got stuck. That's why certain moments, a tone of voice, a silence, a rejection, can make us feel 6 years old again. The past isn't gone, it's alive inside us, waiting to be felt. We think healing is about becoming stronger. But real healing is about becoming softer, soft enough to let the child speak again, to let the truth surface without judgment. Because until you make peace with that voice, you'll keep mistaking punishment for discipline, productivity for purpose, and control for love. The child doesn't disappear when you grow up, they simply learn to wear your face. And every time you look in the mirror, they're still looking back, waiting for you to finally see them. Forgiveness. It's a word we've heard so many times that it's lost its weight. We imagine it as a grand gesture, a single, heroic moment when pain is released and everything becomes peaceful. But that's not how it happens. Forgiveness doesn't come as light breaking through the clouds. It arrives quietly, in small moments, like breath after drowning. Forgiving the child you were isn't about excusing the things that happened. It's not about pretending you didn't suffer, or acting as if you're over it. It's about turning toward the part of yourself you've spent your whole life running from, the part that still cries, still hopes, still remembers. It's about looking at your younger self and saying, "You didn't deserve any of that." For most of your life, you've been trying to fix what you thought was broken. But forgiveness is not fixing, it's understanding. It's realizing that the pain you've carried wasn't a reflection of your weakness, but a natural response to being human in a world that often doesn't know how to love what's soft. When you finally sit with your inner child, really sit, you begin to notice something strange. They're not angry at you for growing up. They're not blaming you for leaving. They're just scared. Scared that you'll never come back for them. Scared that you'll keep pretending they don't exist. This is where the real healing begins, not in endless analysis, not in perfect words, but in presence. To forgive is to listen. To sit down with that version of yourself and say, "I'm here now. I see you. I won't leave again." That's the moment the walls begin to crack. You may cry. You may resist. Part of you will want to look away. But stay. Let the silence stretch. Let the pain speak. It's been waiting for years. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole. He said that healing isn't about becoming something new, but integrating the parts of ourselves we've rejected. The inner child is the first and most sacred of those parts. When you bring them home, you stop being two people, the one who hides and the one who performs. You begin to live as one. Forgiveness is the bridge between those two selves. It's the moment the adult meets the child, not as a parent correcting, but as an equal understanding. It's the quiet realization that all the punishment, all the perfectionism, all the self-doubt were never acts of strength. They were cries for reunion. Alan Watts once said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." That child inside you, curious, wild, tender, is the purest aperture you've ever been. They were the window through which life first saw beauty. Forgiveness is simply wiping that window clean again. You begin to notice this in subtle ways. You start speaking to yourself differently. The voice in your head, once harsh and impatient, softens. You find yourself saying things like, "It's okay. You did your best." You stop chasing every goal like it's a matter of survival. You begin to rest, not because you earned it, but because you finally remember it's allowed. Sometimes, forgiveness feels like grief. Because when you forgive the child you were, you also have to grieve the childhood you never had, the love you didn't receive, the safety you didn't feel, the understanding you didn't know was possible. You have to mourn what could have been before you can accept what is. It's a strange kind of sadness, heavy and beautiful at the same time. It doesn't ask for resolution, only recognition. It's the kind of sadness that washes you clean. As the layers of defense fall away, you begin to see the innocence that never left you. The one hidden beneath the sarcasm, the ambition, the numbness. The one that still believes in kindness. The one that still looks at the sky and feels awe. You start realizing that the parts of yourself you once called immature or naive were never flaws. They were fragments of your original wholeness. Viktor Frankl wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. Forgiving your inner child gives meaning to everything that once felt pointless. The loneliness, the confusion, the tears, they weren't meaningless. They were shaping the empathy you carry now. The same pain that made you close your heart also gave you the capacity to understand others more deeply. Forgiveness transforms pain into wisdom. It doesn't erase what happened, it redefines it. It turns your story from one of survival into one of awakening. You begin to see that every version of you, even the ones you judged, was doing their best to love and be loved. There's a cinematic moment that happens in every real transformation. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. You imagine yourself walking down a hallway of memories. The bedrooms, the classrooms, the moments of humiliation, the nights you cried into a pillow. You stop at one memory, maybe one that's always made you flinch. You look at that younger version of you, sitting there, small and confused, and you simply say, "I'm sorry you had to face that alone." No explanation. No justification. Just presence. In that moment, you feel something release. A soft unwinding in your chest. The child looks up at you. They don't need words. They just need to know you're finally there. This is what it means to return home. Not to a place, but to a part of yourself that was waiting all along. Forgiveness doesn't happen in one moment. It's something you practice every day, in how you talk to yourself, how you rest, how you handle failure. Every time you choose kindness over criticism, you're forgiving the child who was told they weren't enough. Every time you let yourself make a mistake without spiraling into shame, you're showing that child it's safe to exist. Healing is not linear. Some days you'll feel whole. Other days, you'll feel that ache again, the old stories whispering that you're still not worthy. But now you'll recognize that voice for what it is, a child asking for reassurance, not punishment. Forgiveness is not a single act. It's a relationship, one between who you were and who you are becoming. It's choosing to hold your past self's hand, even when they tremble. It's realizing that the parts of you you've tried to hide are the exact parts that make you human. And in that realization, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop chasing love as if it's outside you. You stop fighting the life you're in. Because once you've forgiven the child, the war within you ends. You begin to live differently, slower, softer, truer. You begin to look at the world not as something to conquer, but as something to connect with. You begin to live with yourself, not against yourself. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to hide. And maybe that's what forgiveness really is, not erasing the past, but embracing the one who lived it. The hardest part about healing is not the remembering, it's the living afterward. Once you've seen the truth, you can't return to pretending. Once you've met the child within you, you can't go back to silencing them. The question becomes, how do you live now? Integration isn't a single moment of clarity. It's a lifelong practice. The art of living with your child, not above them. It's the daily decision to treat yourself with the same gentleness you needed years ago. It's reminding yourself that growth doesn't mean becoming invincible, it means becoming honest. There will still be days when the old patterns whisper to you, when you feel the urge to overwork, to people please, to apologize for existing. But now, instead of reacting automatically, you pause. You listen. You recognize the voice behind the habit, the small, scared child asking, "Will they still love me?" And instead of pushing that voice away, you answer softly, "Yes, I love you. Even now." That's what integration feels like. A quiet, inner conversation that never ends. You start seeing every trigger as an invitation, every emotion as a message. The shame that once crushed you becomes a teacher. The fear that used to freeze you becomes a doorway. You realize that peace isn't the absence of pain, it's the acceptance of it. Slowly, the tone of your inner world changes. You begin to talk to yourself the way you wish others had. You begin to give yourself permission to rest, to fail, to feel. You start creating, not to prove your worth, but to express your truth. You stop chasing purpose and start living it, quietly, naturally, through presence. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Integration is that privilege in action. It's when the adult and the child walk side by side, the adult providing safety, the child providing wonder. You stop needing to split yourself into fragments. No more masks, no more pretending. You live as one being again, whole and awake. It shows up in simple ways. You no longer rush to fill silence. You look at people with softer eyes. You forgive others faster, not because you excuse them, but because you recognize their pain mirrors yours. You begin to love without keeping score, to work without proving something, to rest without guilt. Life becomes less of a performance and more of a conversation between who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. The beauty of forgiveness is that it doesn't erase your story, it rewrites its tone. What was once tragedy becomes wisdom. What once felt like shame becomes compassion. The same experiences that once broke you now deepen your capacity to understand others. The child who was never heard becomes the adult who listens deeply. Integration is not about perfection, it's about permission. To be messy, to be real, to be in progress. To let your past be part of your humanity, not a stain on it. When you stop fighting your history, it becomes your greatest teacher. The room that was once dimly lit is now touched by morning light. The adult no longer sits in silence, punishing themselves for not being enough. They breathe. They smile. Somewhere deep inside, the child finally feels safe. The war is over. You realize the goal was never to become someone new, it was to come home to the one you've always been. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering with tenderness. It's looking back at the person you were and whispering, "You made it." And so, as the story comes full circle, you understand, until you forgive the child you were, you will keep punishing the adult you've become. But the moment you turn toward that child, with love instead of shame, with presence instead of judgment, everything changes. You stop running from yourself. You stop fighting your reflection. You stop chasing wholeness because you realize it was never lost. The child you were is still waiting, not for perfection, not for redemption, but for your embrace. And when you finally give it, you'll discover that healing was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering the one who's been there all along, quietly, patiently, waiting to be loved.